Hello, my name is Blossoms and welcome to another Genshin Impact video, and today we have a Thoma build guide for you guys. Thoma is a brand new Pyro Polearm user coming to us in the game, and although he doesn't deal that much damage, he is a fantastic shielder, and the way he applies it is pretty darn unique. In today's video, we'll be going over his kit, what he's good at, as well as the best artifact sets and weapons for him, along with some team compositions and a little bit of a showcase towards the end. I also plan on doing another video on Thoma where we do a little bit more of a deeper analysis comparing him to other shielders and the benefits that he provides to different teams and whatnot later on this week. So if that's a video that interests you, then don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as it one helps me out, and then two, you can see that video whenever it comes up. But without further ado, let's go ahead and show off Thoma. Before getting into the build for Thoma, we need to know a bit about his kit and what he's good at. I'm going to tell you right now, Thoma is an amazing shielder and has a very interesting and unique way of applying it that we'll go over in his kit here. He is not a damage dealer, which I know a pyro unit not being a damage dealer, that's crazy. I thought that was illegal in Genshin Impact, but no, he is a shielder and a very good one at that. For starters, we have Thoma's elemental skill, Blazing Blessing, which deals AoE pyro damage, and that damage is relatively negligible, and summons a shield. This shield is decently beefy, it's nothing insane, but it's good enough and has a duration of 8 seconds and a cooldown of 15 seconds, which may seem like a lot of downtime, but that is negated by his elemental burst, Crimson Oyoroi. And the way Crimson Oyoroi works is that it does AoE pyro damage, and then from that point forth, your normal attacks on any character in your party deal AoE pyro damage and summon a Blazing Barrier. This Blazing Barrier is a brand new shield that stacks with your other shield. So if you have your E-skill shield still, your elemental burst shield that is added on top of that will stack with it up till a certain point, and that is what that max shield damage absorption is there for on the E-skill. The elemental burst just keeps adding to your E's shield there and stacks on top of it continuously, making it a beefier and beefier shield. Now, a lot of you might have been tantalized by the fact that the elemental burst dealt some off-field AoE pyro damage, but I'm here to unfortunately let you know it doesn't deal that much damage. It is not negligible though. It is decent enough, especially since it has a wide cone of effect for that pyro AoE, to where it is not good damage, but the supplemented damage isn't that bad either. It's just kind of like a nice cherry on top situation, and it can get in the way of some of your reactions if you're not careful or you're not pairing him in the wrong teams, but for the most part it's really not that big of a deal. The nice thing about this elemental burst is that whenever your shield thinks it's about to be up on its duration, it's going to get refreshed by this elemental burst. The shield duration on the elemental burst shields is 8 seconds, and it will refresh your total shield health there and just stacking on top, which is really nice. But you will notice this does have a high energy cost and a pretty decently long cooldown of 20 seconds. However, it does last for 15 seconds, meaning you only really have 5 seconds of downtime if you're building him correctly for a lot of energy recharge. As for his passives, they only make him better. He has this one passive where Imbricated Armor here, whenever your active character obtains or refreshes a Blazing Barrier, which is going to be happening all the time through his elemental burst, you gain a stack of 5% shield strength up to 5 stacks, so you can get 25% extra shield strength, which is just going to happen all the time with Thoma. And then you also have his final passive here, where his Crimson Oyorai's Fiery Collapses now scale a little bit off your max HP. Unfortunately, this is a static number, so it doesn't scale to make his damage actually decent. It's just going to be that 2.2% of his max HP. So building him for HP is actually pretty solid, because that is going to be scaling up your damage at least a little bit. As for artifacts for Thoma, you really only have 3 options in my personal opinion, that being the 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate, the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige, and a 2-piece Emblem of Severed Fate with a 2-piece Tenacity of Millith. I think these are going to be the best options. You can definitely, shove in some different ones. The, shield strength here on Retracing Bolide only translates to him, and he doesn't deal that much damage, so it's not really worth it on him or anything. And there just really isn't a 4-piece that helps him out. A lot of people think the Tenacity of the Millith is good on the 4-piece, however, his elemental burst does not count as elemental skill damage, so it doesn't increase your attack or gain that shield strength. If this procced off his elemental burst, this would be a ludicrously amazing set for him, but it just doesn't, which is really unfortunate. I was really kind of hoping that maybe his elemental burst would count as elemental skill damage, but that was just a pipe dream, and the reality is that we're stuck on 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate, 4-piece Noblesse Oblige, or 2-piece Tenacity and 2-piece Emblem of Severed Fate. You can also mix in the Noblesse there there if you really wanted to for the 2-piece, but I think if you're doing any noblesse, you should be going for the 4-piece. The reason for this is, although I did mention his damage isn't very amazing, it isn't entirely negligible. It's just kind of a cherry on top situation. If you're hitting multiple opponents, then it's plenty of damage, especially in like that AoE situation, and can help apply pyro in certain situations. So it's not entirely useless. It's just not a big number. And so increasing the damage actually isn't that bad. 4-piece of Emblem of Severed Fate, giving you that 20% energy recharge, is also very useful. 20% energy recharge is multiple substats of energy recharge. Not to mention, Thoma has an 80 cost burst and a long E skill cooldown. You're going to need a lot of energy recharge to be ensuring he has his elemental burst off of cooldown. So 4-piece of Emblem of Severed Fate just really makes sense. If you have really good ER substats, and you can get it pretty consistently with a combination of Noblesse Oblige and his weapon, then Noblesse Oblige is actually an amazing set as well, and it gets better with Constellations just because the cooldown on your elemental burst gets lowered with some of its Constellations. We'll go over those as well, but Noblesse Oblige does get a little bit better with some of its Constellations, and if you have high energy recharge substats and a weapon that is helping you with your consistency for his elemental burst, then this is a pretty good option because it buffs your entire team. And since Thoma isn't really going to be dealing damage, you don't care that he's not going to be dealing as much damage as something like Emblem of Severed Fate, and just increasing that attack for your teammates is pretty good. However, I think one of the best overall is just going to be the 2-piece Tenacity of the Millith and the 2-piece of Emblem of Severed Fate. It doesn't deal nearly as much damage, but increasing that HP by 20% is a big help, especially for those of you who don't have that many HP substats. This is going to help you out a ton, and I think is a great 2-piece combo to go for him, as none of the 4 pieces are really amazing for him. Overall, they're just nice, and the 2-piece here, you're not really losing anything out by splitting it up like that, and you're just gaining a bunch of substats, which is very helpful for Thoma. As for the main stats on your artifacts, you're really going to be wanting things like HP, pyro damage bonus, or crit rate. Now, you do have options here. You can go full HP on Goblet and Circlet if you really want, but the way I'm building him, I definitely need the crit rate, and I don't hate the damage, so it's very okay, and I want the pyro damage bonus. It is definitely noticeable if you don't have this pyro damage bonus and you actually want him to be dealing at least okay damage. No, he's not dealing massive amounts of damage. It's like maybe 3k or so per fiery collapse there, but if it didn't have this pyro damage bonus, it'd only be like 1500. So getting that there is very nice. HP, because of the fact that one, his damage does scale a little bit off HP, and his shields heavily rely on his HP. You're going to need either really high HP substats and the 2-piece Tenacity of the Millith, or you're going to want an HP main stat. You can definitely finagle that the way that you need to, but I think HP sans, pyro damage bonus, and then crit rate or crit damage circlet, whatever is going to give you that really good ratio, is going to be very beneficial for you. Of course, substats that are going to be beneficial are going to be things like crit rate and crit damage. However, you don't need to worry about those nearly as much as you typically do. Things like energy recharge and HP percent are going to be more valuable, arguably, just because they increase your consistency and your shield health, which is very important for Thoma, and you're not really worrying too much about his damage. I also don't want you guys to discount things like Elemental Mastery, since Thoma has a certain ICD on his Elemental Burst, which means it's just like an internal cooldown, so he only applies Pyro every so often. He's typically going to be the one causing a reaction just because of the cadence of his Elemental Burst, so Elemental Mastery isn't the worst on him, and in fact is pretty decent, and we'll talk about that when we get into weapons as well. But if you get Elemental Mastery substats, I wouldn't cry about it, as long as you still have good energy recharge and HP percent. Elemental Mastery and things like crit rate and crit damage are just nice additives. I also briefly wanted to talk about another main stat alternative for Thoma, just because we're going HP percent, pyro damage, and crit rate, and I did mention you can go full HP on all of these. You can also do dual HP on like the cup and the circle here, and then also just do like energy recharge on the sands to help you out for your energy recharge substats, or stats in general if you're really lacking there. As for the stats on all my artifacts, I'll go over them briefly and then we'll talk about weapons. Now, the nice part about weapons on Thoma is that you have a lot of options, and one of the best ones is a 3-star. Black Tassel here, having that HP percentage is quite good, and since his damage doesn't really matter that much, the base attack nor the passive really matter that much to you, just that sheer stat stick is really nice. However, I will say, since Thoma does have that consistency issue of getting his elemental burst, things like Favonius Lance or things like the Catch are going to be really amazing, even things like Prototype Star Glitter. However much energy recharge is going to help you out the most for your kit, you're going to realistically want around 200% for a C0 Thoma. You can definitely lower that threshold as you go along in its constellations, and we'll talk about that a little bit when we get into those. But I think something like the Favonius Lance is perfect for Thoma, which is great because it's the Mondstadt weapon. He's originally from Mondstadt to Inazuma, which I think is cute. But its passive here is if you crit, you gain some energy particles, and these energy particles are no joke. And of course, that percentage is increased with your refinements there, which is also part of the reason that I have the crit rate helmet on him and I'm not going heavy into HP, is because this is just such a huge consistency booster for him. And this also has pretty high base attack, and the energy recharge isn't super big, but it's nearly 30%, which is pretty darn nice. If I got it to 90, it would be 30%, and it's definitely you know, very helpful for his consistency. Things like the Catch are decent because of the fact that it has high energy recharge and it increases your elemental burst damage and your crit rate, but it doesn't help your consistency as much. But that energy recharge is nice, and if you really want him to try and deal as much damage as possible, then the Catch is going to be good on him. But of course, other characters that deal more damage are going to likely want the Catch. Characters like Xiangling or Raiden Shogun are likely going to be using this, and it's just kind of a wasted slot on him because he doesn't really need this, because the damage he gains from it just really isn't that strong. Now, things like the Keychain Crossbear are actually a pretty solid option, especially if you're free to play. Now, the Catch is a good free to play option, but the Keychain Crossbear is also a pretty solid option just because, one, it gives you that elemental mastery, and we talked about why that can be pretty good on him. It has high base attack, it increases his skill damage, which is kind of whatever. I mean, it's okay, I guess, but that consistency bump of increasing his energy by losing a little bit for a couple seconds is really nice. It just, you know, helps him get a little bit more energy. So if you don't have something like Favonius Lance, I'd say the Keychain Crossbear isn't the worst option, but it's definitely not the best either because it doesn't have that energy recharge substat. Things like the Prototype Star Glitter are only good because of the fact that it has that energy recharge substat, so if you want to go for that, you can. Otherwise, I think probably the easiest and most accessible weapon for people is going to be the Black Tassel, as it's a 3-star weapon. It's very easily levelable, if that's a word, and increases his shield strength a lot. So if you want him to be a shield bot, Black Tassel for sure, and then just as much energy recharge as you can. All right, before we go over my attributes and the teams, we need to talk about these constellations because Thoma does have very good constellations. First of all, his C1 here is when a character protected by Thoma's Blazing Barrier is attacked. Basically, it lowers the cooldown by 3 seconds for both of them, and that can happen every 20 seconds. So it decreases your cooldowns, which is pretty nice, allowing you to get them sooner. The C2 here increases the duration by 3 seconds, which is nice. The C3 here is, you know, it's just the typical talent upgrade there, but it is nice because of the fact that it does increase the beefiness of your shield. And then the C4 here is probably his most valuable because whenever you cast his elemental burst, 15 energy is going to be restored to Thoma, making it from an 80 cost there to a 65 cost, which is just much nicer and a lot more manageable and allows your energy recharge threshold to be that much lower. His C5 here also increases some of his shield strength because you get some from his elemental burst and they scale separately, so this isn't too bad either. And then the C6 here is actually pretty cool because even though Thoma isn't going to be the one dealing damage, whenever you're protected by his blazing barriers, he can make it to where your units are going to be dealing increased 15% damage, which is just really nice. And I hopefully, you know, hope to get his C6 here. I'm not going to probably get it this banner, but in the future I definitely want to shoot for it. Before we go to the teams, I'm going to go ahead and show off my Thoma's build here. I got around 1300 attack. I have 145 elemental mastery that just happened to, you know, happen through substats, and I'm definitely not complaining. Definitely a nice little extra damage for whenever he does proc a reaction. I got 55% crit rate and 106% crit damage, which is nothing crazy, but it's consistent enough for me to proc my Favonius Lance, and that's what I really care about. I have 178 energy recharge. I would preferably like this a little bit higher, closer to the 190 range, especially at C0 here, but this is what I've got for now, and then 46% pyro damage bonus. You can also notice my max HP here is 20k. If I get some different gear and maybe mix it with the tenacity and Millith, I can generally hit around 25k, and I do plan to get him to 90 just for that additional max HP, because that is going to help out a bunch, as he really does take advantage of just more HP. You know, is just going to make your shields beefier, and of course leveling up those talents is going to make your shields beefier, so it's just going to make him better overall. Teams for Thoma are actually pretty simple. Because he's a shield character, he's mostly going to be protecting characters who, well, want a shield, like Hu Tao. This team in particular is very good and can get through the entirety of Spiral Abyss. I was messing around with it, and it is very nice to be able to keep Hu Tao protected and just healed enough with Xingqiu, and also still dealing all of her vaporizes while, you know, getting a buff from Kazuha, because you can, you know, use E skill on Thoma and then, you know, debuff with like Kazuha or whatever, and buff Pyro, and then go to Hu Tao and just pop off. This is a very fun team. If you've gotten Hu Tao on this banner, Thoma is an amazing pairing for her, especially with Xingqiu and stuff, and I really like that. But you do have plenty of alternatives. Of course, Thoma is going to be good with just about any pyro DPS. Yoimiya is also a really good pick for Thoma, because one of the biggest problems with Yoimiya is that she can get trapped in her animations for her bow shots, and she has to do normal attack damage for her highest DPS. And since these normal attacks are going to be giving her shields, that's pretty darn nice. And both of their internal cooldowns are pretty long, so they don't typically get in the way of each other, and I actually really like these guys together. Another thing about Thoma is he's actually pretty good in overload comps, just because overload doesn't really care about your crit rate or crit damage, at least the reaction damage doesn't, because it scales off of your elemental mastery and your character's level. So an overload comp with Thoma is actually pretty ideal, and if you're an overload enjoyer, then he's going to be a pretty sick option for you. Thoma, of course, also pairs well with other characters that want you to normal attack to activate their effects off field, so a character like Xingqiu is very nice. Xingqiu, of course, is going to out-apply his Pyro. Thoma is not very good at applying Pyro, but that's nice because of the fact that characters like Hu Tao can then take advantage of the Hydro that is applied on an opponent, and you can more consistently get opponents frozen and whatnot to set up for like a Pyro DPS like Hu Tao or something without Thoma melting them. The internal cooldown on Thoma is actually kind of a blessing, because it doesn't get in the way of your reactions as much as you typically think it would. He's also pretty good in combinations like the, you know, the quote-unquote national comp with like Chongyun, Bennett, you know, like Xiangling, and, you know, like Kazuha or Sucrose or something. Those all work very well with Thoma. He's not a replacement for Bennett or anything, especially since he doesn't give that huge buff. But if you do need the protection and you don't want to get, you know, like a stun locked, then he's going to be helping you out a ton there. As I said, if you don't have Zhongli or something, then Thoma, I think, is a must pull for you, as he is just a very good shielder, and not to mention he's a Pyro unit, and pairing him with Pyro gives you that extra 25%, and it's very easy, and he pairs well with other Pyro DPSs. Not to mention the fact that his shield is applied continuously, which is super underrated. If you get hit by something big with like Zhongli, or like an Albedo shield that he creates or something from his Crystallize, or like a Noel shield even, your shield's just gonna go away. And that'll happen with Thoma too, and you'll probably lose a little HP with Thoma too. However, you're going to be able to reapply that and prevent yourself from basically ever being staggered. If you have Thoma's elemental burst up, you are just not going to get staggered by an opponent, because your shield is going to be eating that first stagger, and then you're probably just going to be getting another shield immediately after to eat a second one if it even comes your way. So he may not protect all of the damage like some of the other shielders, but he does protect you from all of the staggers, and that's something you're going to want to consider. Thoma also pairs really well with animal characters, especially a character like Zhao. If you had Thoma at C6 and you get that increased 15% plunging damage, not only are you going to be able to proc those fiery collapses, you're going to be giving Zhao just a buff, as well as applying Pyro and allowing him to like swirl it and whatnot. Is very, very good for a character like Kazuha as well, who deals that plunging damage. So Thoma is very good with a lot of the current Animo characters, not only because of the fact that Swirl doesn't really care about the damage Thoma deals, it just you know, cares about elemental mastery and whatnot, but just because of the fact that a lot of these the current Animo characters just pair really well with Thoma, especially when he's at higher constellations. But giving them that extra protection, as well as providing something to swirl with off the field very consistently, is pretty nice. I also briefly wanted to mention the house husband squad of Thoma and Child. They just look similar, and a lot of people wanted to pair them together just because they, you know, look so similar. However, Tartaglia's application of Hydro is way too fast for Thoma. However, you will be delighted to know that because Thoma's application is so slow, it doesn't actually get in the way of a pairing like Tartaglia and Xiangling. So if you want a shielder on your Tartaglia and Xiangling team, then Thoma's actually a really good option because you'll be getting that 25% attack there as well as a shield. So that's a pretty nice, you know, turn of events there, just because of the fact that he's so slow on his application there. It doesn't get in the way of important reactions like this, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. So if for those of you who did want to pair those two together, they actually do work pretty well as long as you're you know, pairing them with like a character like Xiangling or something for your vaporize reactions. So we're going to be bringing in that Thoma build that I've showed you off here in floor 12 of the Spiral Abyss in the team that I showed you a little bit earlier. I'm just going to grab this healing effectiveness one because these ones actually kind of affect Thoma a bit, and I just want him to be, this kind of be like a raw showcase of how good he is in like a team like this. So let's go ahead and show him off a bit. One of the best ways you're going to want to use him there is, of course, getting that E skill and then using Q, just because of the fact that they do stack on top of each other immediately, so your shield is initially just going to be stronger together. And yes, for those of you who might have just noticed, I did get to see Hu Tao. That's a little secret. And you'll see because of the Favonius Lance here, we had no problem getting that back. So that's actually very huge, and that's why I really like the Favonius Lance on him. It is very, very good for him. And you can see he keeps Hu Tao nice and protected here, no problem. And she can just kind of do her business. Of course, these guys are pretty resistant to Pyro. That's kind of bad for my current team, but I'm not really worried about dealing damage here. More so just showing off Thoma's sheer utility here. And you see, because of those elemental particles that we're getting from the Favonius Lance, it's really upping his consistency. And the nice thing you can do is just kind of like hot swap to him, especially at high refinements of the Favonius Lance, and just kind of get yourself some extra particles whenever you're feeling like it. And you can see we basically had no problems keeping his uptime on the shield there at all times, just because we kept his energy recharge high. We gave him a good weapon to influence that. The only thing that's really left for my Thoma is to get some Constellations and increase his HP substats. Well, that's going to be it for the video. Thoma is actually a pretty sweet character. He's not like busted or broken or anything. He's pretty good, and I really like the way he applies his shield, and the sheer fact that he's Pyro means he's going to be fitting in a lot of my future teams. And I'm also just personally really enjoying his kit and the way it works, and personally I recommend him. Well, let me know your thoughts on Thoma, how you're building him and how you're enjoying him, as I'd love to see those in the comment section below. Other than that, my name is Blossums, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.